Hi everyone, this is just a quick review of the four other items on your graphic organizer for how we see some resistance to the imperialist moves that these European countries are going to make during the late 1800s. First one is, these are all going to be in chronological order, so we have the Sepoy Rebellion or Sepoy Rebellion. This is also known as the First Indian War for Independence, so trying to overthrow the British Empire. Some background a little bit is going to help us out. In 1776, late 1700s, Britain loses the North American colonies, that would later be the United States of America, in the Revolutionary War. And as a result, they lose a lot of those raw materials. And so, as the British Empire progresses through the Second Industrial Revolution, they're looking for more of those raw materials to be produced by Britain than be sold out, tying us back into the economic system of mercantilism, giving us that control. So India becomes the next big, large-scale British colony. And at first, it's what's called indirect rule. So each kind of little piece of India is ruled by its own Raja at this time, its own kind of municipal prince. And those princes are kind of left to their own devices as long as they do what Britain is asking for. This system is called indirect rule. Britain doesn't have people necessarily there directing every step of the day for these people. It's done indirectly through these princes that pay honor and homage to Britain. So the Sepoy Rebellion is going to occur in this northern region right here. Again, Britain's going to call it a mutiny. India is going to call it a war for independence. And so again, we take a look at different perspectives and how they shape the way that we think of historical events. So basic information, the Sepoys or Sepoys, these are Indian soldiers under British command. And India at this time is a combination of Hindus and Muslims, and they're treated as kind of second-class citizens to a large degree by the British soldiers in charge of them. They feel disrespected, and then kind of the last straw of this is these new rifle cartridges. Britain issues these new rifle cartridges that can be a little bit faster loading, a little bit more efficient, that kind of thing, and you have to bite the top off of these cartridges. Well, there's a rumor that floats around, it's ultimately completely untrue, that they are going to use cow or pig grease. And actually, at first, when they're approached with this, the Sepoy leaders say, we can't use these, we're not going to put our lips on them, blah, 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 and Britain changes it almost immediately. But the rumor persists, and this is a problem because whether you're a Hindu and believe that cows are sacred or Muslims and don't eat pork, either way, you're going to be offending one of these groups of soldiers under your command. And so that's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. We see this uprising. It is eventually put down here in northern India. And what does that result in? Well, the main result of this is similar to what we saw with the Opium Wars. Expanded British imperial control. So now instead of indirect rule where you have these local princes, you have direct rule in most of the areas of India, where Britain puts their own kind of governors in charge of them. And these people are going to make sure that these local principalities are acting in the correct manner. So that's the Sepoy Rebellion, so mid-1800s, 1856, 1857, that time frame. The next one here is in Ethiopia. And again, a little bit of background. Most of Africa had already been carved up. We saw the scramble for Africa, it really starting with Leopold in the 1850s and then progressing into the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, where they officially carve up Africa, these European nations. Well, Ethiopia is kind of out there by itself, and Italy is going to enter the fray. Italy was never one nation. It wasn't united until 1870. Prior to that, it was this collection of kingdoms. Some of them are owned by the Pope. Some of them are in charge, had been under Austrian control for long periods of time. And so you have kind of disunity. And when Italy tries to eat at the big kids' table and step up and say, here's where we're going to stake our imperialist claim, they're rebuffed by the people of Ethiopia. As I mentioned, again, Italy, new country, it's a little disorganized, it doesn't have a plan, it thinks, to a degree, just because we're Europeans, we have this advanced technology, we're going to be able to just do whatever we want and completely take over. Well, it's been 20 or 30 years at this point that Ethiopia has watched its neighbors fall and learn the tactics of the Europeans. Technology has made its way, meaning more advanced rifles have made their way into Ethiopian hands. And so when Italy comes knocking, Ethiopia, they meet a really well-organized fighting force of Ethiopians with modern technology. And as a result of this, India is pushed away. Actually, this is a big piece of Benito Mussolini during World War II. He's going to go back into Africa and quote unquote punish the Ethiopians for their defeat earlier. Ethiopia, the result of this is that Ethiopia is really the only truly independent African nation during this time frame. Liberia is kind of attached to the United States to a degree. It's like a slaver's colony after the after the banning of slavery from the Civil War. But it's really Ethiopia is looked at as the one true independent nation in Africa during the age of imperialism, late 1800s. The next one we have is the Boxer Rebellion. This is late 1800s now. We're making our way. And we want to kind of jump back to the Opium Wars. So the Opium Wars are mostly down here in the south. Hong Kong is that island that we mentioned prior. Macau we talked about, owned by Portugal. And they do make their way up to Nanking, the British, during the Opium Wars and kind of force China to submit. Well, this, on the other hand, the Boxer Rebellion is going to take place up here in Beijing, the northern capital at this point in time. And this is going to follow a similar pattern. So we see increased Western European control, and the Boxers are going to rise up against them. It's a rebellion against imperialist influence, the Brotherhood of the Harmonious Fists. It's just a phenomenal name for this group that had been around for hundreds of years and turns its attention because these Western European nations are establishing what are known as spheres of influence, places where they have exclusive trading rights, like Britain has in the South, and the United States is a part of this during this time as well. Well, these Christian missionaries are there, and this is looked at by the Chinese as a slap in the face. As not only do you come in and force your economic policies on us, and you have these spheres of influence, but now you're trying to change our culture. Now you're saying that your religion is better than any belief system that we have. And this is a real problem. And so it starts out as just kind of like a march, if you will, and then from there kind of lays siege to an American portion of the city, and then from there spirals into full-out rebellion. The result of this, just like with the Opium Wars, once the rebellion is put under control, we see Western European nations establish even greater spheres of influence, where now it's not just about economic policy, but they're trying to control every step, whether it's political or religious. They are inserting their own culture into these regions in an effort to try and develop greater control so that they have a place for, again, trade of raw materials, and again, a place for selling those manufactured goods once they're produced. The last one is a little bit different than the others, and this is Myanmar. This is just to the east of India and south of China. So here's India, and here's China. Myanmar is right down here, and at this point in time, it's known as Burma. So we call it the Burmese Resistance to a degree. The people are known as the Burmese. Britain controls kind of this whole region during this time period, and Britain does what they do in India. And one of the things that they do is instill what we would call Western education system. So a formalized schooling system based on the British schooling model. And in India, they force this into India, and it's one of the things that Britain will say, well, look at this great thing that we did. Again, keeping in mind that different doesn't always mean unequal when we're talking about education. So they force their way in, and they're going to try and do the same thing in Burma. And Burma says basically, we're not going to do that. You can have your schools or whatever, but we're going to have our own separate Burmese schools that kids will attend as well. And so this isn't actual physical resistance. There's no way that Burma can fight off the British Empire during this point, and they don't even try. But what they do is try to preserve their culture. And so you have these schools existing, and in fact, the schools that are set up there actually make their way into North America. So as people from Burma, again, today Myanmar, make their way over to the Americas, they establish these similar schools there so that the culture can continue to be celebrated, that it continued to be looked at as a point of pride in those people. And this is not different from other groups. Other groups have done this as well. A little bit different because we're talking religion versus nationalism, but for the nation of Israel, they are somewhat tied together. But with Hebrew schools, the development of Hebrew schools around the United States, that's an example of it. We see other nationalities. The Ukraine is famous for this, and Eastern European nations are famous for having their own schools to learn traditional languages. The Greeks do this. A lot of students who have really strong Greek heritage will go to Greek school in addition to regular public schooling or private schooling here in the United States. So this idea is somewhat common, and in Burma we see a particular example of it. So it's just a quick review of the other pieces of your graphic organizer beyond the Opium Wars. If you have to check and go back to the Opium Wars, remember that the videos are linked, and the there's a really good read. It's like a 4-page document that really goes in depth and in detail and would be really, really helpful for you, that is posted as well under the Opium Wars. If you have any questions, please let me know, and have a great day.